The dining room glowed with golden lights and laughter, but Alma felt small in her own home. The Mensa family gathered around a long table covered with rich food, crystal glasses, and too many smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Everyone wanted to look perfect. When Alma reached for a piece of chicken, her older brother Kwesi leaned back and smirked. "Stop asking for money, Alma," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "We all know you're always broke." The table burst into laughter. Even her parents chuckled softly before looking away, pretending not to notice how Alma's face fell. The noise of clinking plates and fake laughter filled the room, but Alma barely heard it. Her heart sank. She wanted to defend herself but stayed quiet. None of them knew the truth, she hadn't asked anyone for money. In fact, she was the one who had been helping them behind the scenes, working long nights, skipping sleep, and saving every sadie she could. While they spent money to look rich, she carried their silent burdens. She looked down at her plate, forcing a small smile, pretending it didn't hurt. But deep inside, the sting of humiliation burned. No one saw her struggle. No one thanked her for the sacrifices she made. As laughter filled the room again, Alma promised herself that one day, she would sit at a table like this, not as the family's shame, but as the one they could never laugh at again. 3 years before that painful Thanksgiving night, Alma's world had been even harder. Her sister-in-law, Efua, had fallen deep into debt, over $52,000 gone in failed business deals and bad decisions. The whole family whispered about it like it was a crime. Every time Alma walked into a room, she could feel their eyes on her, hear their quiet words. If Alma really cared, she would help. "She's just selfish." No one knew that Alma herself was struggling to keep her own life together. Her small salary barely covered rent and food. But she couldn't stand to see Efua break down, and she couldn't bear the gossip that was tearing her family apart. So, without saying a word, Alma decided to help in secret. Late at night, when the rest of the city slept, she sat in front of her old laptop, eyes tired but focused. She had found a second job with an international company, analyzing data for clients overseas. Everyone in her family thought she was just freelancing, doing small side projects. No one knew she was barely sleeping, working 2 full-time jobs, skipping meals just to save every extra coin. Her fingers would ache, her back would hurt, but she kept going. Every month, she sent quiet payments toward Efua's debt, one installment at a time. She never told Efua, never told her parents, never told anyone. There were nights she cried alone, staring at the receipts, wondering why she was helping people who never saw her worth. But then she would remember her late grandmother's soft voice, "Grace never needs to be loud." Those words became her strength. Alma didn't want praise or recognition. She just wanted peace. Sometimes, after sending a payment, she would walk outside and look at the sky. The stars over Accra looked far away, but they gave her comfort. She would whisper, "One day, they'll understand." Then she'd go back to her tiny apartment, take a deep breath, and start working again. Months turned into years. The debt slowly disappeared, and Efua's life went back to normal. The phone calls from creditors stopped. The family started smiling again. They praised Efua for being strong and thanked Kwesi for handling things well. No one even mentioned Alma. They thought she did nothing. They didn't know the truth, that she had carried all of them in silence, while they judged her from their fancy homes and soft chairs. Alma didn't correct them. She smiled and said nothing, even when they mocked her simple clothes or called her broke. She had learned that real strength doesn't need an audience. And in those quiet moments, she told herself, they can laugh now. But one day, they'll know who really kept this family standing. The dinner table glittered with gold plates and polished glasses, but Alma could feel the emptiness behind it all. Kwesi sat at the head of the table, proudly talking about his new imported SUV, describing every detail like a celebrity showing off a prize. Efua joined in, smiling sweetly as she talked about their business expansion and how their company was growing fast. Their parents listened with shining eyes, nodding proudly, completely lost in the show. Alma sat quietly, gently pushing food around her plate, her faint smile hiding everything she knew. The truth was, the only reason Kwesi and Efua could sit there bragging was because of her. The creditors who had once called day and night had stopped because Alma had paid them off, little by little, in silence. Without her, their business success would have collapsed long ago. But her family didn't see that. They only saw what sparkled. Her mother praised Efua for being such a hard-working wife, and her father called Kwesi a real man. Then they turned to Alma and sighed, asking why she never seemed ambitious. Her father shook his head. "You're too simple, Alma. You need to live better. Look at your siblings." The word stung, but Alma stayed calm. She looked at their expensive clothes, their gold watches, the perfect decorations around the room, all symbols of the image they worshipped. They didn't care about truth, only appearance. Inside, Alma felt something shift. She remembered the nights she had gone without food so they could eat. She remembered selling her gold jewelry to make one more debt payment. She remembered pretending she wasn't tired after working 2 jobs just to keep her brother's reputation clean. All those sacrifices, and still they called her ungrateful. It was almost laughable. Efua smiled across the table and said sweetly, "Alma, you really should dress better. You're beautiful, but people might not take you seriously when you look so plain." The table laughed again. Alma forced a small laugh too, hiding the ache in her chest. She wanted to tell them everything, the sleepless nights, the hidden payments, the truth about who really saved them, but she stayed quiet. She had learned long ago that explaining yourself to people who only see what they want to see is useless. As Kwesi raised his glass to toast the Mensa family's success, Alma's eyes drifted toward the chandelier above, its light bouncing off the gold like tiny stars. She whispered a prayer inside her heart, not for revenge, but for patience. She knew their pride was built on her pain. She knew one day the truth would come to light, not because she shouted it, but because life always has a way of revealing what's real. And when that day came, Alma promised herself, she would still smile, just as quietly as she always had. Alma sat quietly as the laughter at the dinner table grew louder, each sound cutting through her like glass. She had managed to stay calm all evening, even when the jokes came her way. But now, she was tired. She wanted to leave, to breathe, to escape the noise that pretended to be love. She placed her fork down gently and said softly, "Excuse me, I think I should get going." But before she could stand, Kwesi's voice sliced through the air. "Before you go," he said with a smirk, raising his glass, "maybe thank me for letting you eat here. After all, we are the successful ones in this family." Efua burst into giggles, hiding her face behind her wine glass. Their parents sat frozen, eyes fixed on their plates. No one said a word. Not even a quiet, "That's enough." Alma felt the sting in her chest, the kind that burns deep and lingers. She looked at each of them, her proud brother, his fake smiling wife, her silent parents, and realized something. They would never see her as anything more than what they decided she was. Her lips trembled, but not from tears. Something inside her shifted. For years she had given, helped, and sacrificed while being treated like she didn't matter. But tonight, something broke, not her spirit, but her patience. She smiled instead of crying. That calm, quiet smile made the room fall still for a second. Kwesi frowned, unsure why she wasn't reacting. Efua looked confused. Her parents exchanged glances, maybe realizing too late that Alma wasn't hurt, she was done. Then, as if the universe itself wanted to answer her silence, Alma's phone buzzed on the table. Everyone looked at it. She picked it up and glanced at the screen. A message glowed across it, short but powerful. It was from her lawyer, confirming the final transfer for the real estate deal she had been waiting months for. Her heart steadied. Her breath slowed. The woman they mocked as broke had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal. Her eyes lifted from the phone, and for the first time that evening, she felt something different: power. Not the kind that shouts or shows off, but the kind that sits quietly, confident in its truth. Kwesi was still smirking, waiting for her to get embarrassed. But Alma only smiled wider. "Thank you for dinner," she said softly. Her voice was calm, steady. She stood, picked up her purse, and turned to leave. None of them noticed the strength in her posture, the peace in her steps. They were too busy enjoying their false superiority to see the shift that had just happened. As she walked out of the grand dining room, the golden lights reflected off her face. She didn't need to fight back or explain. The world would do that for her soon. Tonight, the woman they thought was weak had quietly reclaimed her power. As Alma walked out of the dining room, her phone buzzed again. She stepped into the quiet hallway, away from the noise and fake laughter, and looked at the screen. It was an email from her lawyer. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, though her face stayed calm. The message was short and clear: "Congratulations. The real estate deal has officially closed. Funds transferred. You are now the majority shareholder." For a moment, Alma just stood there, the words sinking in. The freelance project everyone thought was just a side hustle had become something much bigger, something life-changing. She leaned against the wall, remembering the nights she had worked until sunrise, the endless coffee cups, and the long hours spent learning about markets and investments. Everyone had thought she was wasting her time with small online work. No one knew that behind that quiet front, she had been building something solid, a growing empire. Through her late nights as a data analyst, she had made connections with global investors who saw her talent and trusted her with real projects. Step by step, Alma turned her small freelancing into ownership, until today, the day her biggest deal was sealed. But there was more. What made her smile wasn't just her success. It was the irony. The company she had just invested in, the one that had been quietly buying out struggling logistics businesses across the region, had, earlier that same morning, completed another acquisition. Kwesi's company. Her brother's pride and joy. The very same business he had bragged about at dinner, saying it was expanding and stronger than ever. He didn't know yet that the investors behind that deal were led by none other than Alma. The woman he had mocked for being broke now owned the company he used to call his. Alma laughed softly under her breath, not out of spite, but disbelief. Life had come full circle in silence. No shouting, no revenge, just balance. She had played the long game, and now she stood as proof that quiet work and faith in yourself could move mountains. She looked back toward the dining room where her family still sat, eating and talking like nothing had changed. If only they knew that the woman they dismissed, the one they pitied, was now their unseen boss. She thought of telling them, of walking back in and watching their faces fall. But she didn't. Not yet. Power, she had learned, doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real. Alma straightened her shoulders and walked toward the front door. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor, a rhythm of quiet victory. Outside, the cool night air touched her face. She smiled to herself, whispering, "They thought I was broke. They didn't know I was just building." Alma walked back into the dining room with the same quiet grace she had always carried, but this time something in her felt different. The same people who had laughed at her minutes ago were still chatting, unaware that their world was about to shift. She took her seat again, her calm face giving nothing away. When the conversation paused, she looked up and said softly, "Thank you for dinner. I really appreciate it." Her voice was steady, kind even, but there was a sharpness beneath it that made everyone glance her way. Kwesi smirked. "Leaving already?" he asked, trying to keep the upper hand. Alma didn't answer him. Instead, she reached into her bag and placed a thick white envelope on the table. The laughter faded instantly. All eyes turned to her. "Before I go," she said, "I just wanted to give this to the family." Her tone was gentle, almost warm, but there was something powerful in her calm. Her mother frowned, curious. "What is that, Alma?" Alma slid the envelope toward Efua. "This," she said clearly, "is the final payment receipt for your debt, $52,800. Paid in full, 3 months ago. By me." The words landed like thunder. The room froze. For a second, no one moved. Efua's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Quasi's smile vanished, replaced by confusion. Their mother gasped, clutching her chest. "Alma, what are you saying?" she whispered. Alma looked around the table, her eyes calm but piercing. "You all thought I did nothing when Efua was drowning in debt. You called me selfish. You said I didn't help. But I was the one who fixed it, quietly, without telling anyone." The room was so silent that even the ticking clock on the wall seemed loud. Quasi shook his head, trying to laugh it off. "You paid that off. Don't make jokes, Alma. You can barely afford." He stopped when Alma interrupted him gently. "Oh, about money," she said, tilting her head. "You might want to check your email." Quasi frowned, pulling out his phone. A few seconds later, the blood drained from his face. Efua leaned closer, whispering, "What's wrong?" But Quasi couldn't answer. His hands shook as he stared at the screen. Alma smiled softly. "Your company, Quasi. It was bought out this morning. By a firm I invested in. So technically," she said, pausing just long enough for everyone to catch their breath, "it now belongs to someone who doesn't ask for money." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument could be. Efua covered her mouth in shock. Their parents sat frozen, eyes wide, unable to speak. Alma stood up slowly, her chair sliding back against the marble floor. "You wanted success," she said quietly. "Here it is. I just built mine differently." Then she turned and walked away, leaving them staring, the laughter gone, replaced by the weight of their own shame. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the room exploded. Quasi jumped to his feet, his voice rising in anger. "You think you can just walk in here and embarrass me in front of everyone?" he shouted, his face red. He snatched his phone, scrolling wildly as if the screen might suddenly prove her wrong. Efua started crying, her makeup streaking down her face, mumbling, "This can't be true. Alma, please, tell them this is a joke." But Alma didn't answer. She stood still, calm, her hands folded neatly in front of her. The storm around her didn't touch her anymore. Her father's fork clattered onto the table. He just sat there, staring at her, his expression unreadable. Her mother reached out, trembling. "Alma, please, sit down," she whispered. "We can fix this. We can talk about it." But Alma didn't move. She looked at them, the same parents who had stayed silent when her brother humiliated her, who had watched her struggle and called her ungrateful. There was no anger in her eyes now, only peace. Quasi kept shouting, trying to regain control. "You think owning a company makes you better than us? You're still the same nobody you've always been." His voice cracked at the end, the confidence gone. Efua sobbed harder, hiding her face in her hands. The once lavish dining room that had been full of laughter now felt cold, like a place where truth had finally switched on the lights. Alma slowly reached for her coat, draped neatly over the back of her chair. She took her time putting it on, her movements graceful and unhurried. "I'm not here to argue," she said softly. "I came to say goodbye." Her mother stood, desperate. "Don't do this, Alma. We're family. We can make things right." Alma turned to her, her eyes steady. "I used to believe that too," she said. "For years, I thought love meant sacrifice. I gave everything I had, my time, my health, my peace, just to make you proud. But now I understand something." She paused, her voice quiet but clear enough for every word to hit. "Love without respect is slavery." The room fell silent again. Even Kwesi stopped breathing for a moment. Her father looked down, his hands shaking slightly, regret heavy in his eyes. Alma didn't wait for anyone to respond. She picked up her purse and took one last look at the table, the same table where they had once laughed at her pain. "Good night," she said softly. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor like the beat of freedom. Behind her, Efua's sobs filled the silence. Kwesi sank back into his chair, speechless for the first time in his life. Their mother wiped her tears and whispered, "What have we done?" But Alma didn't hear it. She was already gone, her calm voice still echoing in their minds, cutting deeper than any shout ever could. Weeks passed, and the noise around Alma's name began to change. The whispers that once called her broke now spoke her name with respect, or fear. She stood on her balcony one quiet evening, the lights of Accra glowing beneath her like stars scattered on the ground. Beside her stood her little daughter, laughing softly as the wind brushed her hair. Alma smiled, a calm and peaceful smile that came from knowing she had survived everything meant to break her. The family she had once carried now struggled under their own pride. Kwesi's arrogance had faded fast when he realized his company was now under Alma's management. Yet instead of firing him, she kept him on, quietly watching him learn humility as he worked for the sister he once mocked. Their parents called often, trying to reconnect, pretending they had always been proud of her. But Alma didn't hold grudges. She didn't need revenge. Her peace was enough. Her phone buzzed with another congratulatory message. Investors wanted meetings, her business was expanding, and her name was being mentioned in rooms that once ignored her. But she stayed the same, soft-spoken, grounded, and grateful. The world was finally hearing her story, but she didn't need applause. She only needed peace. As the evening breeze grew stronger, Alma lifted her daughter into her arms. She looked at the glowing city and whispered, "Sometimes, the ones they call broke are just too busy building." Her voice was gentle, but her words carried the weight of every sleepless night, every insult, every sacrifice. In that moment, Alma wasn't just successful, she was free.